Hi again and welcome back to my craft room. This is card number 3 in my May Dragonfly Garden class by mail. This one's a little bit different. I don't usually do techniques in a class by mail, so fingers crossed this goes well for all of us. I'm just going to check my positioning and my volume. Yep, okay, so that looks all right. At least that's working. So this card class, you'll need 3 colours of ink. So here I've used Pear Pizzazz, So Saffron and Misty Moonlight. Actually, no, it's not Pear Pizzazz, it's blah, blah, blah. It's Old Olive. Apologies, that didn't start well at all. It should be Old Olive. Where is my Old Olive? That's why I couldn't grab it. I didn't have it. Here it is. You can use Pear Pizzazz, it's just a little bit lighter. I'm actually going to use the Old Olive because it's a bit darker. So swap that out, rewind, Old Olive, So Saffron and Misty Moonlight. Make sure your ink pads are nice and juicy, so you've re-inked them or they're new, whatever. You'll also need a spritzer. Now these are available from practically every craft shop you know, but they do have them online with Stampin' Up. $5 Australian buy you 2 spritzers, so that's pretty good value really. You'll need an aqua painter or a paintbrush. So an aqua painter is only really a paintbrush with a little bit of a reservoir for some water in the base there. I haven't actually got any water in the base. I may need to water to dampen it a little bit later, but it's actually a dry aqua painter. And you'll need a size B block. Stampin' Up size B is, and I'll give you the measurements, in centimetres, it's about 4 3/4 centimetres by about 4, so it's a couple of inches. It's about 1 7/8 by 1 5/8. It's sort of that sort of size in relation to my hand. There you go, you can see I haven't got that big hands. That's what that one looks like. So that's the block we're going to be actually using for our block painting. Okay, so let's get started. The card space that you've got, now don't get too confused. I got confused when I was cutting these and ended up wasting a lot of cardstock. You have a Old Olive card base, which is slightly smaller than my usual. It's actually only 5.5 by 4 1/8. So it's a little bit shorter. And that's only because I had to fit it to the ultimate size of the what's this, watercolour paper. So you've got a watercolour paper that is 3.5 inches by 5 inches. Then you've got to step up to a So Saffron layer, which is 1/4 inch bigger, and then your card base is 1/4 inch bigger again. So that's basically why it's slightly shorter than my normal card bases, because we had to fit the size of this little sheet of watercolour paper. Then you've got another sheet of So Saffron and a piece of basic white, and they are for the inside. So before you go sticking the card together, make sure you don't get your 2 pieces of So Saffron mixed up, because they are very similar in size but not quite. So the one that's going on the front of the card is slightly smaller than the one that's going inside. So get the slightly smaller of the 2 pieces of So Saffron is for the front. So to stop me from getting confused, because I know I am, I'm going to pop the larger piece. I'm going to glue it in now, just to get it out of the way so I don't get confused later on. As you guys know, it will happen. So let's just glue that in now with the white on top. That's for our inside there. So I do have another class coming out in the next week or so, or by the time you see these videos, they might already be out. It's a fun fold class, or a no stamp class. So basically you can do it with just with whatever stamps you have at home. All you really need is your own sentiment stamps. So most of us have got a wall of those. So I give you everything you need, sentiment boxes, everything's folded, everything's scored, just like your kits here, except all you will need is the sentiment stamp and your own glue. So they're a good one for people who aren't avid Stampin' Up people with everything that they've got with everything, all the kit at home. You can use whatever stamps you've got at home. Okay, we'll pop the card base and the second So Saffron layer away. We'll bring in our watercolour paper. Now, I choose watercolour paper to do this technique on because there is water involved, obviously, by the name, and normal paper tends to curl and peel. So you can use watercolour paper or you can use shimmer paper. Stampin' Up also has a range of a lighter grade, slightly shimmer paper, and it will stand up to the water that's involved here a bit better. So we're going to grab our B size block. It was B, wasn't it? Yep, B size block. And we're going to start with our So Saffron ink. So open up your ink block. So there's going to be a bit of water involved here, so make sure you're away from anything you don't want to get wet. If you're like me, it'll go everywhere. Okay, so grab your block and pop it just straight down in your ink pad, and you get some ink on it, obviously. Then bring in your spritzer, and this is where the water comes involved. Keep yourself a nice distance away from the block. Aim it at the block and give it a couple of sprays. So don't make it too wet, but you need it so that the ink will move and starts to sort of puddle. Then you flip it over, you position it over your watercolour paper, and you just take it down. Now, the best thing you can hope for is that all the puddles that you've made with your spritzer join up into one big block of colour. Okay, so which I can see, just looking through my ink pad there with a nice little see-through block, that's exactly what happened. We've formed ourselves a lovely sort of solid block of colour there. You see that? Now, if that hadn't gone solid, what you can do, you can cheat a little bit. Bring in your paintbrush or your aqua painter, grab some ink off some of the watery ink off your block, and then just fill in the gaps where it might be a bit thinner than you want or a bit blotchy. We don't have to do it in this case because it's come out with a lovely block of colour there, so that's good. We may have to with the others, let's see. So there's our first one. And what we're going to do is bring in the Old Olive, and I'm going to do the bottom block. So I want them to so I want the next one to be hard up on there like that, but slightly over to the right. And then I want the last one to be back over onto the left and another step down. So we just want to make sure we have our blocks in the right position. You could actually mark them lightly with pencil before you go in, just so that you know that you're putting them in the right positions. Okay, same deal with our Old Olive. Now, I think my Old Olive block ink pad is a little bit dry. Yes, it is. I wonder if it'd be better to use the Pear Pizzazz after all. Let's see if I give it a bit of a spritz. It is very dry. Move that out of the way because it'll be a disaster. Where's my spritz coming out? There. Okay, so you can see there it's deceptive. It's actually a bit juicier than I thought, but it has puddled quite a lot. So just get your brush, bring those puddles together, because otherwise you're going to have a splodgy. So you want it's sort of as black, as matte, or as well covered as you can. I might take it back in for another go. I'm adding water to my ink, but don't worry, it's water-based ink, so that's not a problem. So I'm going to give it another spritz. Take that out of the way. I'm too close. You can see I'm too close. Try and stay far away, because otherwise you'll end up with a big splodge like that. But let's see how that goes. We might have an opportunity to do the patching up. Oh no, that's not bad. You can see how it's all run together. It's a bit, yeah, it's quite heavy around the edges though. We've got a bit of a splodge, but that's okay. So I'm going to use my ink on my pen just to even up those dark bits before it dries into the paper. Okay, so how's that? It's not going to be exact. It's not a neat technique, but I think it's quite effective. Okay, so let's clean this one off, and we'll come back in the middle now, in here, with our Misty Moonlight, our blue. Oh, that's a funny noise. Okay, so remember, as I mentioned before, make sure your ink pads are nice and juicy, and you don't need re-inking because you will have a bit of trouble. Okay, so now our blue, and my blue is beautifully, as you can see, beautifully inked up. So we put a bit of blue on our block, get our spritzer, nice distance away so you get a nice fine even mist. Trouble is if you can see it. Just a couple of spritzers. I probably put a little bit too much on there. A couple of spritzers. Bring back your card base, flip it over, take it slightly off centre this time, slightly to the left, and bring it down. Now this one, even though it was the most juicy of my stamp sets, it has actually left us with a slightly mottly look. You can see that there. So we do get a chance to fix that up a little bit. So get your ink pad or your paintbrush with your ink, and I have left a bit of a gap there as well, which probably it's because I'm not coming into it at the right angle because I've got my camera in the way. But if I could bring your head over the top so you know that you're in exactly the right spot to bring that down. So you can actually, as I say, just bring your paintbrush in and even up the splodges. There we are. So you can get your matte black, your matte block of colour, even if you have to cheat a bit. So you can see I've actually got that one a little bit too close to the old olive block, and that's why they've run into each other. But I don't think that's an issue either. I think that's quite artistic. So if I was doing it again, I would probably bring my head right over the top, position it so that the blue was touching onto the yellow a little bit more and not quite as close to the green. I just haven't got over it enough over the top to position it properly. Okay, so there we've got our 3 blocks of colour. Now, do not bring your stamp in now. We're going to be using this stamp here, because if you do it, it's going to run everywhere, and I say this from experience. You need to let this dry before you stamp it with the black, because then otherwise you will not get, it'll all run into each other and be a horrible, horrible, indistinct mess. I'm going to bring in my heating tool just on its lower settings, and I'm just going to dry that out. So you could go and make yourself a cup of coffee, go and brush your teeth, have a shower, whatever it is you haven't done today so far. Put a load of washing on, cook some tea, have some lunch. And let that dry out naturally, or as I say, bring it's quite wet. And let that dry out. I should have actually prepared one earlier, shouldn't I? That would have been a cleverer way of doing things. But I sort of did run out of watercolour paper, which isn't a good plan when you're going to be doing it as a class. You need to have lots of stock, but I haven't got any more. I've ordered some. Hairdryer would work just as well if you haven't got a heat tool in your stamp room, in your craft room. Just to bring out a hairdryer if you're a bit impatient and you don't want to wait for Mother Nature. Okay, that middle one's still a bit damp. I can feel it. Now your paper will curl a little bit with the heat, but that's okay. We'll use double-sided tape to glue it down, and it'll stick nice and flat to our card base. Now that Misty Moonlight is quite dark there when we stamped it, but it does lighten up. You can see it's lightened up already. It lightens up when you dry it. So don't worry too much about that. It's a beautiful colour. Well, that's about as exciting as literally watching paint dry, isn't it? Anyway, that's all good. I think that's enough. Okay, so we'll straighten that out a bit. So you've done with the messy part. Well done, congratulations. So now we want to bring in this lovely tall set of lovely tall floral arrangement here. It's got some daisies and some sort of little leaves and thorns and things in there, which is quite pretty. So we want to do that in black. Now if you have Stays On black and you use it without making a horrible mess everywhere, which is my problem, I'd suggest you use the Stays On, because you'll get a nice black image. Well, anyway, if you're using normal ink, just make sure your ink pad's nice and juicy and you get a nice amount of black ink onto your stamp. But as I say, if you use Stays On and you're happy using it and comfortable using it, I would use that for this, just to give the really dark. I've got a slightly damp piece of thing there, so I might turn it. I might remove it actually, because I don't want to get my card base wet. So just make sure it's all dry. Okay, so let's stamp that up again. It probably dried a bit. So make sure that's nice and inked up, nice and black. Bring it down onto those blocks. So align the top daisy of that with your yellow at the top, and then bring the green, the bottom of it, down here to the green. Make sure it's just pretty straight and ink it down. And hopefully it'll be nice and sharp. There you go, it's not too bad. As I say, it would be nicer probably with the nice dark Stays On black. But that's fine, that's lovely. I love this design. Okay, there we are, see? It's just really earthy. It's almost, you know what I mean? It's organic. Okay, so what I might do just to give those leaves a little bit of something special, and this is what I've done with my original card, you can either grab your dark So Saffron or something that's got a slight orange tinge to it. So I've got my dark Daffodil Delight. It's just darker yellow, and just colour in the leaves of your daisies. So just the top, they're just there in the top. So just where it overlaps the So Saffron, just give them a bit of a highlight colour just so they stand out just a tiny bit more. There we are. It's hardly noticeable, probably no one but you and me would notice that, but it's nice. Okay, so we're going to bring in our thank you for your kindness sentiment. It's the one we're going to use here. And I'm going to pop that just down in the bottom right hand corner. It's going to overlap the green a little bit, the what's it called, Old Olive, a little bit, but not too much. So bring it right up to the right hand side so you don't overlap too much, and that's just in there like that. So that's the sentiment for this one, with no sentiment boxes. It's just stamped straight onto the watercolour paper, just like that. But I think that's nice. It doesn't detract, or it doesn't steal the eye away from our beautiful blocks of colour. Okay, so let's pop the rest of the card together. You've got a layer of So Saffron, and as I say, I think I'm going to use double-sided tape if I can find it, to make sure that sits down nicely. Here it is. So I will use this just to get the slightly curvy watercolour paper just to sit flat on the rest of the card. You can use glue if you like, but you probably have to hold it down a little bit longer than you normally would. And it just took off in their van. It's busy around here today. It's usually the quietest street in the world. Well, not in the world, but you know. Today people coming and going all over the place. Okay, so we put our watercolour paper onto our So Saffron. Careful if you do use double-sided tape because there's no going back, and that's a little bit crooked. No going back. Oh well, that's okay, that's a little bit crooked. Take my warning. I'm going to use glue for the rest of it, because at least then you've got some wriggle room, or wriggle time. There we are. Ooh, unless you knock it like that. There we are. So that's all layered up and lovely there. I really like this one. I really like it, even though it's got some imperfections as we go, but that's crafting, isn't it? Live crafting. Okay, so nice little highlights of this card. We've got some black silhouette dragonflies using the punch. So this is just using the punch. I'll show you in a sec. Oh, we've got two little black, so they're like black silhouettes of baby dragonflies, or they're probably off in the distance somewhere, just with black cardstock. So all I've done is, you can see with your punch, you've got your big dragonfly, which we've used for all the other cards, but you've also got this little one at the top. So if you feed a, say, 1 inch wide piece of black cardstock through, sort of at that level, you can get a series of these little black dragonflies. Don't use a whole piece, because then you'll end up with a big black dragonfly as well. You don't really want that because you're not using it. You just want this little one at the top. So as I say, just cut yourself a strip of black, feed it through there, and you'll get a series of little black dragonflies. Okay, so these little black guys, little black dragonflies, I'm going to just glue them onto the card. So one of them there, and the other one coming up from the bottom there. Okay, and I've also given you this cute little ladybug. So here's a ladybug that goes with the Dragonfly Garden bundle. He's just so cute. He's in like nice little copper tones. So I'm going to pop him on the card as well. So you could use a glue dot, but he is actually hollow. So I find it hard to get the glue dots to actually take around the edges of a hollow embellishment. So I'm going to use a fair bit of glue, a nice daub of glue on there, and then position our little ladybird just on top of that little thing of glue, and just give him a little bit of pressure just to make sure it all sticks in place. That's going to take a little while to dry, so don't go too crazy moving your card around for the moment until that is actually dry and stuck in place. Okay, so that's the outside of card number 3. I hope you like that one. I really do. I've left the inside blank in both of the cards, so just so you can write your own personal thank you in there, or bring in one of your favourite stamps from something else. But there we are. So that's the use of watercolour paper and block stamping. It's a lovely technique. As I say, it's quite earthy, it's quite organic. It goes perfectly with this big tall dandelion spray of flowers here from the set. But you could put any tall flower over there and any combination of colours, but yeah, that's what we're doing for this card. So I'd love to see if you use this technique for anything anything further over the next few weeks or whatever. I'd love to see what you come up with. Anyway, so that's it. That's card number 3. So that's the whole course. You've now seen all the cards. I hope you enjoy them. As I say, there's a new fun fold card coming in the next week or so, Well, by the time you watch this, it's probably out already. So keep an eye on my Facebook page. I usually do 2 card classes per month. So one will be based on a product. So this, in this case, the Dragonflies, but future will be different products. And one is a fun fold that you can use any stamp set that you happen to have at home, any sentiment stamp set. So keep an eye for both of those. Hopefully there's something for everyone. Anyway, thanks again, and I hope to see you back. Hope you've enjoyed this one, and I hope to see you back for future classes over the coming months.